On June the 12th, 1759, there was Bishop and Mrs. Spongenberg, Seidel, the minister at Bethania, Gottlieb Reuter, and there was one other person in the party. I do not recall now. Anyway, they drove over here on a horse and wagon, and when they reached the creek in the lower end, Spongenberg decided this is the place where the village should be begun.
When Spangenberg chose this land, this was known as Cardew Creek. And Wachovia is in effect the drainage basin of this creek. That's the structure of Wachovia. And he chose it for exactly the reason we are right here. He wanted the creeks for mill power, water power. He wanted the bottomlands, which we see out here, for agriculture and to run cattle on. And he wanted these uplands for timber to build with and for stone to build with.
This map or plan of Bethania in Wachovia was drawn around 1760 by Christian Reuter, the Moravian surveyor who came through and literally walked this entire landscape, literally came the day the town was staked. The first Moravian families coming from Pennsylvania and coming from Europe sought permanent homes here. The first school was built for boys and girls here in Moravian Wachovia in 1760. Every house father, for the most part, was also a farmer in addition to a tradesman, and so you find orchard lots surrounding the entire town where apples, peaches, and other fruit varieties were grown.
Back then, the church owned all the land, so they would allocate their parishioners the amount of land they needed for the orchard lot and the farm lot and so forth. And and it wasn't until about 1817 that the church turned the town back to the ownership of the people.
There was a cobbler, 2 weavers, a person who grew silkworms for silk. Was quite interesting. The ironwork smith was an iron worker. Philip Transu was a surveyor. You had the Laymans and the Transus who built carriages, and you had Stroop as a bread maker.
See, this town was founded in 1759, right at the height of some of the worst parts of the French and Indian War. There were huge problems west of the Yadkin River. The Yadkin River was really the frontier. And there were big problems out in the west of the Yadkin River with the Cherokee attacking the settlers who moved out west of the Yadkin. So in a way, the initial houses here were built smaller and closer together, not only because of the medieval plan, but for defensive purposes.
They felt that the Indians were encroaching upon them, and so Spongenberg told them they would not be attacked if they rode fast. And so the Indians observed a little later that these white men rode like the devil.
Now, in the upper part of town, there was a little bit of a different demographic there. These were individuals who knew the Moravians well. They ran the store in the town on behalf of the church. George Hooser ran the tavern privately in the north end of town where newcomers, outsiders to Bethania would be staying. But it was essentially these non-Moravians who were really influential in the direction Bethania was headed in the 1770s.
No, they wanted more integrated male-female choir practices. This was not even allowed. They wanted to marry who they wanted to by love, not by lot, according to the church elders. There were a lot of friction points from the beginning between the Bethania merged community and the official Moravian church.
They led Bethania away from its early stages as a almost utopian Moravian faith community to a modern bustling settlement in the early years of the 19th century.
In the Revolutionary War, well, Cornwallis came through here and pillaged the village, as I like to say, even though he is completely lionized because of it.
The Redcoats marched through Bethania and were here for a day, and Cornwallis slept in the house across the street.
Lord General Cornwallis did come through and occupied the town overnight on the 9th of February 1781.
Cornwallis camped here and spent a night here on his way to Guilford County and that important, almost ultimate battle of the Revolutionary War. They actually won, but it extracted a terrible toll on them in terms of their losses, and so it really is viewed as kind of paving the way to the British surrender in Yorktown.
The British soldiers confiscated what they needed from the town. They took most of the livestock, and there was one Moravian lady from Bethania, and they took her cook pot and the supper she was cooking. And then they moved on to Old Salem, and a few days later, she marched down to Old Salem, or to Salem, and demanded to speak with General Cornwallis, and she said he was welcome to her food, but she wanted her cook pot back, and he gave it to her.
Bethania was very industrious. Back then, it had many businesses, and they all was back on the back side here on Main Street.
We were at the intersection of the old Plank Road and the Great Wagon Road, which went up and down the eastern seaboard, and then the old Plank Road went to Fayetteville and then to Edenton, so that you could get all of the ship passage and trade that way. So we were a huge trading nexus.
It became a very prosperous industrial center because of its location near the Great Wagon Road. It had already established wagon routes to Pennsylvania, Charleston, and Fayetteville.
And everybody stopped here. They're to overnight in the tavern, to buy tinware, pottery, all of the cattle, grains they needed to continue their journey either up the eastern seaboard or further south. We were a huge crossroads and much more prosperous than Salem because, again, the Plank Road and the Great Wagon Road intersected right here.
People used to come here with the wagons, I reckon, with the wagon loads of corn and put it in, dumping, grinding, yahoo, and trade pocket knives, and have a drink of White Lightning, and bop on home, man.
The Civil War years also affected Bethania. Stoneman's raid came right through Bethania after crossing the Yadkin River at the Shallow Ford. They occupied the town during the day of the Monday leading up to Easter. They disrupted all the planned Easter services that week, and so April 1865 was really a time of chaos. We know that many horses, animals, livestock were acquired by the soldiers, but fortunately the town was not burned.
The Yankee troops come through Bethania one Sunday morning. The people was all in church over there, and it must have been about 11:30. And when church was over and they got out of church, they went home and found that the army had ransacked every house, took everything of value, took all their food, all the meat out of the meat house, took everything they had. But they survived it.
Stoneman's Raid, famous Civil War battle in this area near the end of the Civil War, and the Union Army marched past this house. It must have been in, 1864, 1865? Yeah, and the legend has it that they didn't burn the town because it was raining very heavily that night, so all they could do is march through in the muck and the heavy rain saved the house, spared the town of Bethania, even though they had to put up with the indignity of all those Yankees marching through.
The soldiers decided that they would burn the town down.
Both times, like the Revolution and the Civil War.
They took the outhouses, the rail fences, and all like that. It burned just sweep right on down, burn the whole town down. But you know, I believe that there is a God, and I believe that He didn't want that to happen, because rain came and extinguished the flames, saved the town.